I'm Dr. Robert Davis, family life educator and leadership coach. This is my co-host, R.P. Soriano. Soriano attended Johns Hopkins Carey Business School, worked in the financial industry, and was an international consultant before partnering with me to launch UnBoxed to Lead. Me? Well, I worked for over 20 years as a senior pastor and a community organizer. Then I retired and started a leaders peer support community called UnBoxed to Lead. Soriano and I have been friends since the early 90s, and with our varied experiences and expertise, we help leaders reach the next level in their leadership. So join us for the next few moments as we unbox the power and the potential of your relationships, your leadership, and your life. And because of confidentiality with most jobs now, the person that's leaving, especially when they have strong connections with other team members, they get to share their narrative and you don't get to share your side or administration's side. So they get to talk about how, administration was doing them wrong and wouldn't give them this, that, and the other that was due to them, and how they, you can't come back and say, oh, no, this is what really happened. This is why we really had to fire this person. So, and that in of itself, that's why the leader has to be, and we're going to talk about this as we move in those 8 steps. That's why the leader has to be strategic and thoughtful in how they approach the whole process, whether they are, working for a financial firm where when they let someone go, even under the best conditions, security has to be there. You can't take anything with you and all that kind of stuff. Or whether, you're working at a welding plant and you get let go and they tell you that you got 2 weeks before your last day. It doesn't make a difference. The principles of how a leader handles it is extremely important. So when we talk about how a leader manages themselves when it's time to fire or to lay off or to let a team member go, we have to think about what is the UnBoxed to Lead approach to leader enrichment. And our approach is to help leaders to focus on self. And of course, when we talk about focusing on self, we're talking about 2 things: focusing on how you show up as a leader. So just that intentionality in and of itself will help you to be to show up better in this process. So by focusing on how I manage myself in relationships, how I show up as a leader, how I interact with equals and subordinates and superiors, being very thoughtful and intentional about that is so important. This is what we mean by focus on self. Now, as you well know, focusing on self as well means to focus on your personal and professional life goals the same way that you focus on growing the organization. And the reason that that's important in this context of letting people go is if you see what you do, if you identify yourself just by what you do for a living and the organization that you work with, then there's going to be additional stress and fear and anxiety around whatever impacts the organization. The more that a leader can spend time focusing on who they are outside the organization, their life goals, their own personal and professional goals and what they want to accomplish, then the more that they are able to compartmentalize and to define themselves as who they really are, and not the self that is enmeshed with the organization, or rather the self that is defined by the title and the job description. And so too many leaders don't have a life outside of work. And, you say, tell me a little bit about yourself. And the very first thing they do is, tell me a little bit about yourself. If you ask me, tell me a little bit about yourself. Well, I talk a lot. I love to joke. I'm a foodie. That's me. You see where I'm coming from? That's nothing to do with what I do. Tell me about yourself. I'm a foodie. I love to travel. I'm highly disappointed. I love the formerly known Washington Redskins, now Washington Commanders, and I'm highly disappointed in how they've performed over the last 25 years. That's me. I like to wrestle with my kids and I love teasing and joking. That's the me. That's the me that makes me me. Not that I am the executive director of this nonprofit or the founder and president of UnBoxed to Lead. That's my title and my position. And so who am I outside of that is so important. And that's one of the things we talk about when we say focus on self. So today I want us, and as we go through this process, I want us to talk about how the leader focuses on self by focusing on how they show up and function as a leader, especially in relationship. And one of the things, and you and I have talked about this, Raphael, is there's no secret sauce to successfully letting someone go. And that's because each industry is different. And sometimes there are actual, legal requirements when you let someone go. So, there's no real secret sauce to letting someone go. What I do want to do today is to increase our awareness of what is going on in the process of letting someone go and try to give a roadmap of how to navigate this terrain in a way that minimizes the impact on you as a leader, on the individual who's being let go, as well as the team members in the organization. And so the success of navigating a workplace relationship breakup is dependent on the leader and how well the leader understands and manages his or her own anxiety. There is no way to part ways, no way to break up, no way to fire that does not have some form of anxiety. Even when the split is amicable or someone is just leaving so they can pursue higher goals and ambitions, there is a level of anxiety that exists, because you still have to feel, especially if it's a great person and they're like, hey, I finally got that position here that I've been looking for, or I finally started that business I always want to start. And you're so excited for them. It's now like, who's going to replace, like right now, I'm having anxiety. Who's going to be my Chanel? I depended on her for so many things. Who's going to be my Chanel? Yeah. I'm happy that she's no longer physically suffering. And I'm glad that she's touched so many people's lives. But the reality is, who's going to be that Chanel? And that's, it's selfish, but it's human and it's real. And you think about that with each organization. So with that said, anxiety is not bad, but anxiety does need to be managed. Because one of the things anxiety does is anxiety tells you that it's time to eat. Anxiety tells you, hey, that looks like a lion just got out of the zoo. Get in your car and drive away. Yeah. Anxiety tells you that. You know where I'm coming from? Anxiety says, man, you probably don't need to do something crazy, jump off a bridge or whatever. So anxiety is not bad, but it does need to be managed. So as you and I have been talking and as we've been studying, we've identified 8 tips on how to minimize anxiety flooding the workplace relationship system. And for today's show, if you'll be so kind, I'm just going to share 2 of them, and then let's pick up the rest of them. So can I go ahead and start sharing what those are? I've done a lot of talking. Can I go ahead and start sharing with those?
Yeah, let me just say that I'm RP Soriano here with Dr. Robert Davis, and we're talking about how a leader manages anxiety around firing, layoffs, and losing team members. And we've talked about, you've shared how it starts with how the leader shows up. It starts and then it goes into how the leader identifies or understands who they are as their self, and being identified by more than just the position that they carry. And it is about understanding and managing anxiety. And you've got these 8 steps. So why don't you take us through the first 2, and then we'll go from there.
So talking about the 8 steps to managing anxiety so that it doesn't flood you or flood the workplace or flood the workplace relationship system. And I guess I would say that tip number 1 is, remember, the leader is the main thermostat and regulator of the intensity of anxiety in the system. The leader is the main thermostat. So as you know how a thermostat is, the leader turns up or turns down the heat. And too often leaders don't realize that you are able to manage anxiety within the whole system just by managing it within yourself, because you are a thermostat and a regulator. And so for a leader to be aware, okay, hold on. If I show up tense, stress, angry, anxious, if I show up, with all manifesting these things, then man, that's really going to be a bad look for the whole team. So let me figure out how I'm going to show up. How am I going to function in this reality? Because the last thing I need is for everybody else to panic. I remember watching an episode of The Office. I love that show.
That is your leadership. I mean, that's what you go to for leadership all the time. I mean, you reference The Office whenever it comes to leading. I mean, it's not some famous author. It's not some intense research study. You always head back to The Office.
Man, The Office is by far, especially the first 7 seasons. The first 7 seasons of The Office is by far the greatest instructional on leadership that any TV show that I'm aware of, any sitcom that I'm aware of has ever produced. Mm-hmm. But Dwight decided, who's one of the characters on the show, he decided he was going to set a fire to teach the people about fire safety. And then he locked all the doors so they couldn't get out. And he wanted to see if they remembered his presentation because nobody listened to him. And so they realized that they were trapped into a place that they thought was burning because there was smoke and stuff around. They thought the place was on fire. And the regional director, the head man, Michael Scott, he tells everybody, calm down, everybody. Calm down. Calm the blank down. I mean, he's just losing it. And then about 30 seconds later, he's like, we're trapped. Every man for himself. We're trapped. Every man. I was like, man, this is leadership 101. I mean, we're trapped. Every man was. You just watch the level of anxiety go up and up and up in that one scene, and it is so true. Had Michael Scott, I know it's all fictitious. It's,
yeah.
But had he in that situation said, hold on. How can I bring calm? Because I'm the thermostat. I can either turn the heat up or I can make it a little cooler. How can I calm this situation versus how do I just be me and react and just
yeah. Let me add to that with an illustration, a story that I have, because I think it's you've made a great point here. So much of this being able to regulate anxiety is also to understand who you are as a person, your personality type. And I experienced this firsthand in a leadership boot camp that my wife and I attended when we were in graduate school. And what happened is before the leadership boot camp, we all took this, the Myers-Briggs personality assessment. And so we got a chance to see what our personality type was. And what they did was they took everybody's personality type and we did simulations and scenarios that gave us some insight into how different people respond and react to things. So your personality type could play a lot to do with the way that you deal and manage anxiety. There's skills that you can clearly develop to help you manage that, but you also have to understand that your personality type might and your background and your experience may have you respond to things in a different way that other people would. So here's an example. The facilitator of the boot camp asked everyone, talked about the personality types, the extreme extrovert, the people that were somewhere in the middle, and introverts, and then extreme introverts. And so he asked for 2 volunteers, 3 volunteers technically, but he asked for 2 volunteers. He said, someone who has in their report that they are kind of an extreme extrovert, I need you to volunteer. Guy, everyone raises his hand. He picks someone. Said, okay, someone who's an extreme introvert, raise your hand. They pick someone. Said, okay, I need you two to go outside and wait for a second. So he asked for a 3rd volunteer. Someone stands up and says, this is what you're going to do. You're going to get up, you're going to stand in the middle of the room, and you're not going to say a word. You are not going to respond. You're not going to say a word. You're just going to stand there. I'm going to call one of the volunteers in, and I'm going to ask them to fire you. Okay, so the first person to come in was the extreme extrovert. And so this poor guy walks in, he stands there, and the facilitator says, okay, Dennis, that's Rob there. And he's this introvert and this extrovert, immediately you can just see his personality come in. How you doing, Rob? how's everything going? And Rob, of course, is not supposed to respond. So he just kind of nods, but he introduces himself and, how are you? And so he says, okay, Dennis, fire Rob. And you could see immediately that Dennis starts, and I'm using fictional names here. Dennis starts to, it's almost, you can see the sweat start to, this is a fictional, this isn't even real. And he says, fire Rob. And the guy starts to sweat. And then he proceeds to make up a story around this whole event. And he says, oh, Rob, man, he says, man, I know you just bought a new house. I know you just had a new baby, man. And I know that the timing for this could not be worse. And we're just watching this guy. I was like, none of this is true. But he created so much anxiety around a skit. Yeah. And so he says, man, I got to tell you, man, I'm so sorry to do this. And he's just, and then of course, Bob is not helping because he's just looking back at him because he's been told not to respond. Yeah. And so the guy squirms. Dennis is squirming even more and more and more. I don't think he ever got around to firing him. I think he may have even promoted him, Robert, at the end of the day. I think he said, man, just take my job, but I don't think he ever got around to firing. So, everybody, so we were getting some insight into, wow, this is what it's like for an extrovert to have to go through this process. There's so much, there's so much connection there. He had a connection with a guy he didn't even know. He invented a connection. Yeah. So he sits down and, for several minutes after, man, this guy is just, he's just distraught. And this didn't even really happen. He was so distraught. So he calls in the introvert and he says, same thing. James, this is Bob. And James says nothing. He says absolutely nothing. He looks this guy in the eye. He says, this is Bob. And they just look at each other. And he says, James, fire Bob. He looks at him. He says, Bob, you're fired. And like the guy you want as your hitman, that's you want. I ask no questions.
That's your Luca Brasi.
Yes, right. You told me that this guy was fired. I got to fire him. No problem. No big deal. I'll just fire him. That doesn't mean that this guy, James, is just a cold-hearted, monster. It's just that he processes and deals with things a completely different way. His anxiety touch points might be completely different than what, Dennis's were. Yeah. And so, it just makes me think about what you said. You really have to understand yourself so that you understand how you are going to operate that thermostat. So that if you could be so unanxious that it could probably cause some anxiety.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, wow, how could this guy just take out his sword and lop this guy's head off and not even think twice about it? What would he do or what would she do, in my case?
Exactly.
It's like having Darth Vader for a boss. Sometimes some people could feel that way.
And that's such that awareness. And so that's the first point, probably the most important, is to just be aware of the power that you have, not the power to hire and to fire, the power that you have over the level or the temperature of anxiety within the organization. The second thing that I want to share, and then we'll close out, is before there's ever a time, maybe it should have been the first one, it's before there's ever a time to fire, to hire, whatever it may be. You have to be a principled, consistent leader, or a consistently principled leader. That has to be who you are. And so then when this part of the job arises, when you as the leader are all over the place, people don't know what to expect. But when you are a consistent leader in the way that you interact with your team, your honesty, your truthfulness, and all those other things, then when this aspect of the job comes up, because there's going to be a time when there's going to need to be raises and cutbacks in departments. When you are a consistent, principled leader, then the team knows, hey, I can trust this person. I don't agree with this person, but I trust this person. I trust this person is doing it out of a good place. I trust that this person has followed a principle. So when you are a consistent, principled leader. That's so important that you don't, it's not just about developing a strategy when it's time to fire someone. It's about being consistent and principled and having core values that you live out at all times, regardless, in the good, the bad, the ugly. This is who I am. We've talked about this so much. One of the things we do at UnBoxed Leaders help leaders to develop their guiding principles. But that is essential for the leader to have and to demonstrate. Man, I've enjoyed this conversation. I'm gonna pause right there because I can't wait to pick it up the next time.
Sounds great. So we'll leave it there. That will bring us to the end of our broadcast. Thank you once again, Dr. Davis. I can't wait for part 2 of this discussion. It's a very difficult thing for leaders to have to deal with. And so I'm glad that we're able to offer some guidance and some help under this area. The UnBoxed broadcast is produced by Bobby Davis Jr., graphics and video design produced by Damon Mace, and marketing and promotion by John Sedano. Remember to visit our website at www.unboxedtolead.com. For Dr. Robert Davis, I'm RP Soriano. We look forward to seeing you at the next broadcast of UnBoxed as we help you unbox the power and potential of your leadership. Be well.
UnBoxed provides a full-service leaders peer support community that helps high-level leaders become more authentic leaders who build healthy workplace cultures and reach their personal life goals. To learn more and discover how we can take your leadership and your life to the next level, please visit our website at unboxedtolead.com. That's unboxed2lead.com. Again, that's unboxed2lead.com.